The priest had just spoken his final words over my wife's grave when I felt it. That cold, familiar weight settling into my chest. The weight I'd carried for 30 years. The weight of silence. The weight of secrets. The weight of loving someone so completely that you'd destroy yourself just to keep them safe. The mourners were beginning to disperse. Black umbrellas folding against the gray sky. Muffled condolences. The scent of wet earth and wilted flowers. I stood there, staring at the casket being lowered into the ground, and I thought about how strange it was that after all these years, after everything I'd sacrificed, after every sleepless night and every tear I'd hidden behind closed doors, this was how it ended. Not with a whisper, not with a gentle goodbye, with my son's hand connecting with my face in front of everyone who had ever known us. I can still feel the sting of that slap. Not the physical pain, though that was real enough. It was the shock that paralyzed me. The way the world seemed to tilt sideways for just a moment. The way the air left my lungs like I'd been punched in the chest instead of struck across the cheek. My son, Daniel. My boy. The child I'd raised since the day he was born. The child I'd held in my arms when he took his first breath. The child whose fevered brow I'd pressed cool cloths against through countless sleepless nights. The child I'd taught to ride a bike. The child I'd helped with his homework. The child whose college tuition I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for. The child I'd given a part of myself to when he was dying. He looked at me with eyes that held nothing but contempt. Eyes that had once looked up at me with adoration. Eyes that had once sparkled with joy when I walked through the door after a long day at work. Now they were cold, hard, filled with decades of misdirected anger. "You ruined my childhood," he said, his voice shaking with rage. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I didn't beg for closure. I just quietly walked away. I could feel the stares of the funeral guests burning into my back. Friends, neighbors, distant relatives who had come to pay their respects to my wife, who had come to support our family in our time of grief. They watched as I walked away from my son, my dignity shattered, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. They watched as I climbed into my car and drove home, the silence in the vehicle deafening. When I got home, I locked myself in my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, reliving that moment over and over again. The look in his eyes, the force of his hand against my cheek, the words he spat at me like venom. "You ruined my childhood." How many times had he said that to me before? In different ways, with different words, but always with that same accusation burning in his chest. Always with that same belief that I was the villain of his story. I never defended myself. That was part of the promise I'd made. Part of the burden I'd agreed to carry. When he was angry with me for missing his baseball games, I took it. When he blamed me for not being home enough, I took it. When he accused me of not loving his mother enough, I took it. Every accusation, every insult, every moment of disrespect. I absorbed it all like a sponge, never once explaining that the reason I worked so hard was to keep food on the table. Never once explaining that the reason I wasn't home was because I was trying to afford his medical treatments. Never once explaining that the reason my marriage seemed strained was because I was protecting his mother from her own mistakes. I sat in that room for hours. The light outside faded from gray to black. The house grew dark and quiet. I could hear my own breathing, slow and measured. A conscious effort to keep myself from breaking down completely. My mind drifted to the letter that had sat in my nightstand drawer for years. The letter my wife had written years ago, on one of her worst nights, when the guilt had become too much to bear. She had given it to me, sealed and addressed to Daniel, and she had said, "Someday when I'm gone, give this to him. He needs to know the truth." I never wanted to give it to him. I wanted to protect him from the truth. I wanted him to keep his memory of his mother pure and untarnished. I was willing to carry the weight of being the villain for the rest of my life. I was willing to let him hate me, let him despise me, let him blame me for every misfortune that had ever befallen his childhood. It was a small price to pay, but something had changed. That slap changed everything. That look in his eyes changed everything. And late that night, when I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs, when I heard his gentle knock on my door, I knew what I had to do. "Dad," he said, his voice soft, almost broken. "I know you're awake. I know you're in there. Can we talk?" I didn't answer for a long moment. I just sat there, the letter in my hands, feeling the weight of the truth I was about to unleash. I had protected him from this for so long. I had lied to him, let him believe that I was the monster, all to preserve the image of his mother. But she was gone now. There was no one left to protect. I opened the door and handed him the envelope. His name was on the front, written in his mother's elegant handwriting. I saw his eyes widen, saw his hands tremble as he took it from me. He looked at me, confusion and curiosity replacing the anger that had been there just hours before. "What is this?" he asked. "It's from your mother," I said. "She wrote it years ago. She wanted you to read it after she was gone." He stared at the envelope for a long moment. "Why are you giving it to me now?" "Because there are things you need to understand," I said. "Things I should have told you a long time ago. Things that would have saved us both a lot of pain." I watched as he walked down the hall to the living room. I watched as he sat on the couch, my wife's final letter trembling in his hands. I watched as he tore open the envelope, unfolded the paper, and began to read. And then I watched as his world fell apart. The letter was written in my wife's careful script. She had always been particular about her handwriting, taking pride in the elegance of her letters, the beauty of her words. Even in that final message, meant to destroy everything her son believed about his life, she couldn't help but be beautiful about it. Daniel read the words silently at first. I watched from the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see his face changing, the emotions flickering across his features like shadows in candlelight. Confusion, disbelief, and then, as he reached the part that would change everything, horror. "My son," the letter began, "there is a truth I've hidden from you your entire life." His hands started shaking. "After I married your father, I betrayed him. I became pregnant by another man. When I told that man about the baby, he abandoned me and disappeared." I watched as Daniel's face went pale, watched as his jaw dropped slightly, as his eyes widened with the shock of what he was reading. He had grown up believing he was the product of love, of commitment, of a family built on trust. Now he was learning that his very existence was the result of a mistake. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was yet to come. "I fell to my knees and confessed everything to your father, begging for forgiveness. He had every reason to leave me, but instead he forgave me. He chose to raise you as his own son and loved you from the day you were born. He never once let you feel like you weren't his child." Daniel looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears that hadn't yet fallen. "Dad," he whispered, "is this true?" I didn't answer, couldn't. My throat was too tight, my emotions too raw. I just nodded, watching as he turned back to the letter, as he continued to read the words that would shatter every belief he had ever held about his life. "When you were 16 and fighting for your life, it was your father who donated his kidney to save you. He begged me never to tell you because he said, 'A father doesn't earn love by reminding his child of his sacrifices.'" I saw the tears start to fall then, saw them streaming down his face, dripping onto the paper, smudging his mother's elegant handwriting. He remembered that time. He remembered how sick he had been, how close to death he had come. He remembered waking up in the hospital, weak and confused, but alive. He had always thought it was a miracle. He had always thought it was luck. He had never known that I had given him a part of myself to keep him alive. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why would I?" I said. "A father doesn't earn love by reminding his child of his sacrifices." He looked down at the letter again, his hands trembling so badly he could barely hold the paper. "There's more," he said. "There's so much more. Keep reading," I told him. "You need to understand everything. Years later, when my mistake led to a terrible accident, your father even went to prison to protect me, so you wouldn't lose both parents." I watched as the realization dawned on him. He remembered that time too. He had been just entering adulthood when I had been taken away, when I had been sentenced to prison for a crime I hadn't committed. He had always believed I was guilty. He had always believed I had brought shame to our family. He had never known that I was protecting his mother, that I was taking the fall for a mistake that she had made, that I was sacrificing my freedom so that he wouldn't have to grow up without any parents at all. Every burden you blamed him for was actually mine. He carried my sins in silence because he loved us more than himself. Daniel's body began to shake with sobs. The letter slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor. He slid off the couch, landing on his knees, his head bowed, his entire frame trembling with the weight of the truth. "Dad," he cried. "Dad, forgive me. I was wrong. You were the only father I ever needed." He crawled toward me, reaching for my legs, clinging to me like a drowning man clinging to a lifeline. "Please, Dad," he begged. "Please forgive me. Everything I did, everything I said, all those years of blaming you for everything. I didn't know. I didn't know the truth. I didn't know what you sacrificed for us. For me. Please, Dad. Please forgive me." I looked down at my son, at the child I had loved from the moment I first held him, at the boy I had raised as my own, at the man who had struck me in front of everyone. I looked at him and I remembered every moment of pain I had endured, every accusation, every insult, every moment of rejection. I remembered the way he had looked at me when he was 16, lying in a hospital bed, too weak to speak, but with eyes that said he blamed me for his sickness. I remembered the way he had testified against me at my trial, convinced that I was a criminal, convinced that I had brought shame to our family. I remembered the way he had cut me out of his life after I was released from prison, telling me he never wanted to see me again. He had hurt me so deeply, so many times, so many ways, and through it all, I had remained silent. Through it all, I had protected him from the truth. Through it all, I had loved him with every fiber of my being. But that one moment, that slap, that look in his eyes, something had broken inside me. "Daniel," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I already forgave your mother. I paid the cost in front of you. I won't make that mistake again." He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen with tears. "What do you mean, Dad? What mistake?" "I forgave her for everything," I said. "I forgave her for the affair. I forgave her for the accident. I forgave her for the years of watching me suffer. I forgave her for asking me to raise another man's child as my own. I forgave her for letting you hate me. I forgave her for everything that destroyed my life." My voice was steady, calm. It was the same voice I had used throughout my marriage. The voice of a man who had learned to suppress his emotions, to push them down so deep that they could never surface. The voice of a man who had decided that love meant sacrifice. But this time, the voice was different. This time, there was no emotion behind it. This time, there was nothing but emptiness. "I forgave her for all of it," I continued. "But I won't forgive you." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, ready to fall. "Dad, no," Daniel pleaded. "Please, you have to forgive me. You have to. I didn't know. I didn't know the truth. If I had known what you did for me, what you sacrificed for me, I never would have treated you that way. Please, Dad, I'm begging you, don't do this." He was clinging to my legs now, sobbing, begging, completely broken. The anger that had been in his eyes at the funeral was gone, replaced by desperate pleading. He was no longer the strong, self-righteous man who had slapped me in front of everyone. He was a frightened child, terrified of losing the only father he had ever known. But I didn't see the frightened child. I saw the man who had rejected me, the man who had blamed me, the man who had never once stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the villain he believed me to be. "Daniel," I said, pulling my legs away from him, all those years, I carried your mother's sins. All those years, I let you hate me. All those years, I sacrificed everything, gave up everything, endured everything, because I loved you, because I wanted to protect you from the truth, because I wanted to keep your mother's memory pure." I looked down at him, my face a mask of emotionless resolve. "But I have nothing left," I said. "I gave everything, every ounce of love. every drop of blood, every moment of my life. And what did I get in return? Rejection, contempt, a slap in the face at my wife's funeral. His sobs intensified. Dad, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please give me a chance to make it right. Please. I want you to leave, I said. I want you to leave this house and never come back. Dad, please, he begged. You can't do this. You can't cut me out of your life. You're the only family I have left. Mom is gone. I have no one else. You had me, I said. For 30 years you had me, and you threw it away. I walked past him, toward the door. He grabbed at my leg, trying to stop me. I shook him off. This house is my mother's house, I said. But my mother is gone, and I don't want to be here anymore. Dad, please, he cried. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just give me one chance to make things right. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. No, I said. You've made up my mind for me. That slap was the final straw. This isn't fair, he protested. You can't punish me for something I didn't know. You can't blame me for the lies I was told. You knew, I said. You always knew. Not the specifics, but you knew that I loved you. You knew that I sacrificed for you. And you chose to hate me anyway. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. You chose to believe the worst about me, Daniel. You chose to see me as the villain of your story. You didn't want the truth. You wanted a monster to blame. And now that the truth has been revealed, you want me to pretend that all that pain never happened. Dad, please, he begged. Leave, I said. And don't come back. I walked out of the house and into the night. I walked for hours. Through the streets I had known my entire life. Past the houses I had walked past 1,000 times. Past the park where I used to take Daniel when he was a child. The memories were everywhere. A painful reminder of everything I had lost. I remembered the first time I held him. He was so small, so fragile, so perfect. His mother had been in the hospital for hours, and when they finally placed him in my arms, I felt something shift inside me. I had known he wasn't biologically mine. I had known the truth from the moment his mother confessed. But none of that mattered. In that moment, he was my son, and I loved him with a fierce, protective love that I had never felt before. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, how he kept falling, kept scraping his knees, kept crying in frustration. I would pick him up, brush off the dirt, and whisper encouragement in his ear. You can do this, buddy. I believe in you. And when he finally got it, when he finally rode down the street without falling, the look of pure joy on his face was worth every moment of struggle. I remembered his first day of school, how he had clung to my leg, refusing to let go, how I had knelt down and told him that he was going to make so many friends, that he was going to learn so many amazing things, how I had promised to be there to pick him up at the end of the day. And I was always there. I remembered his 16th birthday, the day he got sick, the day everything changed. We had been planning a big party, invited all his friends, ordered the cake, decorated the house. But that morning, he woke up with a fever that wouldn't break. We rushed him to the hospital, and the doctors told us his kidneys were failing. They told us he needed a transplant. They told us he might not make it. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think twice. I told the doctors to test me to see if I was a match. And when they said I didn't even consider saying no. I gave him my kidney without a second thought. Because he was my son. Because I would have given him anything. Because his life was worth more than any sacrifice I could make. I remembered the years that followed. The years of recovery. The years of watching him struggle. The years of working 3 jobs to pay for his medical bills, to pay for his college tuition, to give him the life he deserved. I was tired all the time. I was stressed all the time. I was desperate all the time. But I never complained. I never told him how hard it was. I just kept going because that's what fathers do. They sacrifice. They endure. They love. And then the accident. The accident that should have ended everything. The accident that would have destroyed our family if I hadn't stepped in. His mother had made a terrible mistake. A mistake that could have ruined all of us. She was going to go to prison. She was going to be taken away from us. And Daniel, already so fragile, already so broken, would have lost both of his parents in one fell swoop. So I took the blame. I confessed to a crime I didn't commit. I went to prison for years. I lost my freedom, my reputation, my dignity, and I never told Daniel the truth. I let him believe I was a criminal. I let him believe I was the monster, because that was better than the alternative. That was better than him knowing the truth about his mother. He testified against me, you know. He stood on the witness stand and told the court that I had been a terrible father, that I had been absent and neglectful, that I had brought shame to our family. I sat in the defendant's chair and listened to my son condemn me, and I didn't defend myself. Couldn't, because the truth would have destroyed him. The truth would have made him hate his mother. The truth would have made him question everything he believed about his life. So I remained silent. I took the punishment. I did the time. And when I got out, I tried to rebuild my relationship with him. I tried to prove that I had changed. But he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to see it. He had already made up his mind about me. I was the villain. I was the monster. And nothing was going to change that. Now, all these years later, the truth had finally come out. And it was too late. Too late to undo the damage. Too late to heal the wounds. Too late to make him see the truth about the father who had loved him unconditionally. The father who had sacrificed everything for him. The father who had given him a kidney, his freedom, his dignity, all in the name of love. I walked until my feet ached. I walked until the sun began to rise. I walked until I found myself standing at the edge of the river, staring into the dark water, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I thought about the letter. I thought about the truth it contained. I thought about the moment Daniel read it, the moment his world collapsed, the moment he realized that everything he believed about his life was a lie. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt happy that he finally knew the truth, that he finally understood everything I had sacrificed for him. But I didn't. I felt empty, because the truth didn't change anything. The truth didn't undo the years of rejection. The truth didn't heal the wounds. The truth didn't bring back the son I had lost. I had given everything for that boy. Everything. And in the end, it wasn't enough. I didn't go back to the house for 3 days. I stayed in a cheap motel on the other side of town, sleeping in a bed that smelled of bleach and desperation, eating meals that came from vending machines. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my messages. I just sat there, staring at the walls, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. On the 3rd day, I got a call from Daniel's wife, Sarah. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Please come home. Daniel is in a terrible state. He hasn't eaten, hasn't slept, hasn't spoken to anyone. He just sits in the living room, staring at that letter. He keeps saying that he has to talk to you, that he needs to apologize, that he can't live with what he did to you." I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just listened to her crying, listened to her pleading, listened to the desperation in her voice. "Please, Dad," she said. "He's your son. He's always been your son. You can't give up on him now." I thought about it. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn his love. I thought about all the years I had endured his rejection. I thought about the moment he slapped me, the moment he looked at me with such contempt, the moment he told me I had ruined his childhood. "It's too late," I said. "He made his choice." "No, Dad. He didn't know. He didn't understand. Now that he does, he's devastated. He wants to make it right. Please give him a chance." I hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling. I went back to the house that evening. I didn't go inside. I just stood across the street, watching the lights in the windows, watching the shadows move behind the curtains. I thought about all the memories that lived inside those walls. All the laughter, all the tears, all the love, all the pain. I saw Daniel through the window. He was sitting on the couch, just as Sarah had described, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. He was crying the way he had cried when he was a child, when he was scared, when he was hurt, when he needed his father to make everything better. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt my heart soften. I remembered that boy, the boy who had clung to me, the boy who had looked up to me, The boy who had believed I was the greatest man in the world. Where had that boy gone? When had he disappeared? When had he been replaced by the angry, bitter man who had slapped me at his mother's funeral? I wanted to go inside. I wanted to hold him in my arms and tell him everything was going to be okay. I wanted to forgive him and move on, to try to rebuild the relationship we had lost. I wanted to be a father again. I wanted to be loved again. But I couldn't, because every time I thought about forgiving him, I remembered the slap. I remembered the look in his eyes. I remembered the feeling of my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. I had forgiven his mother. I had forgiven her for the affair, for the lies, for the years of suffering. I had forgiven her for letting me raise another man's child as my own. I had forgiven her for letting me go to prison for her crimes. I had forgiven her for letting our son hate me. But I couldn't forgive him. I couldn't forgive him for choosing to hate me. I couldn't forgive him for never once stopping to wonder if maybe he was wrong. I couldn't forgive him for the years of rejection, the years of contempt, the years of pretending I didn't exist. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a grown man, and he had made his choices. I walked away from the house that night and never looked back. I moved to a small town on the other side of the state, a place where no one knew me, where no one had expectations of me, where I could finally be free from the weight of my past. I got a small apartment, a modest job, and I started over. It wasn't easy. I had spent my whole life giving everything to others, and now I had to learn how to give to myself. I had to learn how to be alone, how to be content, how to find peace in the silence. But I did. And eventually I found a kind of happiness. It wasn't the happiness I had imagined. It wasn't the happiness of a family gathered around a dinner table, or the happiness of watching my son succeed, or the happiness of growing old with the woman I loved. It was a quieter happiness, a simpler happiness, a happiness that came from letting go. I let go of the guilt. I let go of the pain. I let go of the need to be loved. I let go of the need to be understood. I let go of everything that had been holding me back. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. I still think about Daniel sometimes. I think about the boy he was, the man he became, and the choices he made. I think about the slap, the letter, the moment everything changed. I think about whether I made the right decision. I think about whether I should have forgiven him. There are moments when I wonder if I was too harsh. Moments when I wish I had given him a chance. Moments when I miss him so much it feels like my heart is being torn in two. But then I remember the way he looked at me that day. I remember the contempt in his eyes. I remember the weight of his hand against my face. And I realized that I made the right choice. Because love isn't about sacrifice. It isn't about enduring pain. It isn't about giving everything and expecting nothing in return. That's not love. That's martyrdom. That's self-destruction. That's a slow, agonizing death of the soul. Real love is about balance. It's about give and take. It's about mutual respect and understanding. And I had never had that. I had always been the one giving, the one sacrificing, the one enduring. And Daniel had always been the one taking, the one receiving, the one expecting. The truth was that Daniel had never truly loved me. He had loved what I could do for him. He had loved the idea of a father who would sacrifice everything for his child. But he had never loved me for who I was. He had never seen me. He had never known me. He had never truly understood what it meant to be loved by a father like me. And maybe that was the most painful thing of all. Not the rejection, not the contempt, not the slap, but the realization that the boy I had raised, the boy I had loved, the boy I had given everything for, had never really known me at all. I live a quiet life now. I have a few friends, a few hobbies, a few simple pleasures. I take walks in the park. I read books in the afternoon. I eat dinner alone and watch the sunset from my balcony. I don't hate Daniel. I don't love him either. I just don't think about him anymore. I don't let the past consume me. I don't let the pain define me. I've moved on. But if I'm being honest with myself, there's a part of me that still wonders. Wonders what could have been. Wonders what would have happened if I had been stronger, if I had been smarter, if I had been better at protecting myself while protecting others. Maybe I should have told the truth. Maybe I should have let Daniel know what I sacrificed for him. Maybe I should have been honest about his mother's mistakes, about the affair, about the accident, about everything. Maybe if I had been honest, things would have been different. Maybe he wouldn't have hated me. Maybe he wouldn't have rejected me. Maybe he would have loved me the way I loved him. But I'll never know. And that's okay. Because life isn't about what could have been. It's about what is. And what is a quiet life lived on my own terms. A life free from the burdens of the past. A life of peace. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is silent and the darkness presses in around me, I think about my wife's final words. The words she wrote to Daniel, the words that destroyed everything he believed about his life. My son, there is a truth I've hidden from you your entire life. She hid so much from him. She hid her affair. She hid his true parentage. She hid the accident. She hid the truth about my sacrifice. And in hiding the truth, she destroyed everything. She destroyed his perception of his family. She destroyed his relationship with me. She destroyed his sense of identity. She thought she was protecting him. She thought she was keeping him safe. But all she did was build a house of cards that was destined to collapse. And when it collapsed on all of us. I don't blame her. I could never blame her. I loved her too much. I loved her more than she deserved. I loved her through the affair, through the guilt, through the accident, through everything. But I also love myself now. And that's something I never did before. The story of my life is a story of sacrifice. A story of love. A story of pain. A story of forgiveness and the failure to forgive. A story of a father who gave everything to his son and got nothing in return. But it's also a story of redemption. Not the kind of redemption that comes from being forgiven, but the kind that comes from learning to forgive yourself. The kind that comes from letting go of the past and embracing the future. The kind that comes from realizing that you are worthy of love, not because of what you give, but because of who you are. I am not a hero. I am not a villain. I am just a man who tried his best, who made mistakes, who loved deeply and was hurt deeply, who survived against all odds and found peace in the process. My son may never forgive me for walking away. He may never understand why I couldn't forgive him. He may spend the rest of his life wondering what could have been, feeling the weight of his mistakes, wishing he could go back and change everything. But I hope he finds peace too. I hope he learns to forgive himself. I hope he learns to let go of the anger and the guilt and the pain, because holding on to those things only hurts you. Holding on to the past only holds you back. Holding on to what could have been only prevents you from embracing what is. I have embraced my life. I have embraced my choices. I have embraced my peace. And that, ultimately, is the greatest gift I could ever give myself.